Welcome everyone to another episode of New Game Plus. I'm Jason, your host, and this one's a little bit different. We're all going to be recovering from TGS. There's lots of stuff going on at the moment that is going to make it a little bit tough for us to get a new episode in. So what we thought we would do, like you do in any television show when you have run out of time, is you make a clip show. And that is basically what we're going to do. But we're not going to give you clips from the television show. We're going to give you clips from the YouTube channel. And I guess it's an interesting thing for us because obviously nearly everything that we make on television ends up on our YouTube page or our Facebook or whatever the case may be. But the main thing that really, I don't know, it's a strange thing that we do is we do focus on making TV, and that's basically my fault. I grew up making television like level 3 days. I've been doing it for about 11 years now, and this is the format that I feel the most comfortable in. So I make them come in and I make them do all this show, and it's great because I get to be a little desperate about it. But there is so much stuff that we create that doesn't necessarily fit this format, and that's one of those things that is great about the guys on the team here is that they will always create this external content, whether it's website articles, whether it's YouTube videos, which you're about to see a bunch of, whether it is Twitch streams, which we do nearly every night. So there's lots of great content that exists outside of the show. And if you are just one of our television fans and you're watching this at home, I do encourage you to go check it out on our YouTube page or just go to our website, newgameplus.tv. But I guess the big thing about it is that TV as a medium is a very different thing to YouTube. Like, yeah, we've got like the kind of the Tonight Show set up here, a little bit of a peer behind the curtain. We've got the Tonight Show set up here because it's very easy to facilitate conversation. YouTube videos aren't necessarily about that. And what you're about to see is some great videos from Matt and Jamie specifically. So Matt, for a long time, has been doing these videos where it's games that we've gotten early and they're not going to fit a TV deadline in time. So he'll create like either a hands-on or a guide or something like that. And you're about to see a couple of those for Fire Emblem. And then Jamie has his series, which is the recommended, and he also, one of his reviews that he did while we were on hiatus, we got Mario Maker early. He released that video on the release date of the embargo for Mario Maker so that people could watch that content there. And while a lot of what we do on the TV show isn't timely, a lot of what those guys do is timely, and it's probably some of the best content that we produce. So I really do encourage you to check it out. But for now, we're going to go straight into one of Matt's videos about Fire Emblem Three Houses? Three Houses? I think it's called Three Houses. You'll find out soon enough. Matt will tell you.
As a fan of long-running game development studios, it's sometimes hard to see them lose their footing as industry pioneers. For Intelligent Systems, this couldn't be further from the truth. After a string of questionable titles like Paper Mario Color Splash, codenamed Steam, and to a more polarizing extent, Fire Emblem Fates, it felt like the famed developer had lost sight of what made their output so appealing in the first place. Though following 2017's well-received Fire Emblem Echoes, fans have been excited to experience Intelligent Systems' first strategy RPG home console offering since over a decade, with Fire Emblem Three Houses. And from here it begs the question on whether or not it sparks a return to form, or if it's a completely unnecessary diversion for the series. This is Matt from New Game Plus, and welcome to our Fire Emblem Three Houses review. Setting the scene, you fill the role of a mercenary tasked with routing enemies from a squad of disciples serving at Garreg-Mach Monastery. You soon learn they hail from an academy hosted on-site and tucked away within the mountains of Central Fodlan, a gigantic continent whose land is divided into 3 separate nations. As they lead you there, you find that each student represents a nation and a house, hence the Three Houses tagline, and from there, they urge you to teach them the ways of war and diplomacy as their professor. One thing that stands out is the way the game is presented. Three Houses really pulls out all the stops to achieve an aesthetic fitting of Germanic nobility. Everything from the design of the monastery to the gorgeous murals that grace each chapter cutscene is absolutely ace. The CGI isn't too bad here either. If you've seen any anime in the last decade, such as the Golden Age arc movies of Berserk, it has a very similar look and tone to that. However, anything that's rendered in real time is a little bit of a mixed bag. If you play the game in handheld mode, be prepared for some slightly muddy textures and weird character model rendering due to the poor resolution. However, dock mode fares much better, but frame rate can take dips when the action gets a little too hectic. Thankfully, with Three Houses being a strategy RPG, this doesn't really affect the overall experience as much as if this was a game occurring in real time. If you can ignore some of these slight shortcomings, the character design really shines through. Both in appearance and personality, students within each house have widely differing motivations and views, accentuated through support conversations. It's great that Intelligent Systems has taken the chance to pepper most exchanges with really interesting dialogue topics relevant to the themes of the game, instead of really sterile flavor text than what you get in Fire Emblem Fates. For example, characters converse about loyalty to one another and their respective nations, mercenaries working under religious grounds despite harboring secular views, and the list goes on. One personal favourite of mine is a character called Petra, a foreign student who primarily joins the academy as means of relieving political tension between her homeland and those who inhabit central Fodlan. Her slight language barrier and precarious position makes her journey a fantastic one to see through to the end. It's shining moments like these in Three Houses that give the player enough incentive to invest in their development and explore them, rather than just dismissing them as units devoid of any characterization or respect. As for how the game actually plays, the setting implies some huge changes for how you proceed in Three Houses. In most Fire Emblem games, progression is generally of a linear fashion, save for a few extra optional chapters. Three Houses shakes things up to a considerable degree, almost just as much as Fire Emblem Gaiden had done, and this is achieved through a number of ways. Most notably, systems like the Weapon Triangle and the Trinity of Magic is reworked to favour skill grades, and abilities that can be learned and equipped by levelling up said skills. Though the biggest rework is the game's format, following a Gregorian-style calendar. At the end of each in-game month, the player is assigned a major plot point specific quest to complete. The entire month leading up to that quest can be spent any way the character wants, allowing a level of freedom you don't usually get in most mainline Fire Emblem games. If I were to compare this to other games currently out on the market, expect time management similar to the Persona series or even Final Fantasy Type 0. Once you select a house of students as their professor, you can spend time in between classes by exploring the monastery, engaging in minigames, and completing quests to raise rapport with faculty staff or motivating students so they perform better during study periods. In addition, you can also take part in battles to grind for experience, or even attend seminars for specialty training. Though while the game stresses heavily that you should focus on the growth of your students, trying to reach that balance between leveling them and yourself is what makes the brunt of the challenge in Three Houses. Your main avatar is a unit themselves, and by extension shares the same resource meter that your students can use to skill and level up. And the real thrill outside of battle is trying to find the most optimized path that you can take leading up to each month's big fight, or in a worst case scenario, deciding whether or not you should fit in that extra sword lesson for yourself, or ensure that your students are highly motivated to get the most out of their next lecture. For the player that loves micromanagement, they will find a lot to adore here. Though when it comes down to brass tacks, what is a Fire Emblem game without the combat? What you get here is a pretty good mix of classic Fire Emblem gameplay with a fresh coat of paint, and a host of complementary systems that sets itself apart from previous installments. Aside from standard attacks, abilities such as combat arts and gambits allow for better positioning or leverage for each unit. And it is safe to say that there is a combat art for almost every single situation. For example, if you need to pick Pegasus Knights off from an impossible angle, use a curved bow shot for better range at the cost of your hit rate. Or, if you're facing off against a knight with an obvious high defense advantage, use a Helm Splitter art that shatters armor-based enemies at the cost of your weapon durability, and the list goes on. While most of these features are indeed quite welcome, there are some additions that make the game feel perhaps a little too cozy, even while playing on classic mode. A rewind mechanic called Divine Pulse allows you to head back to any point in time within a mission, down to the most intricate of individual unit movements and actions. While it starts as a very limited resource, it scales ridiculously, leaving you with up to about 8 charges as your character levels up. While there are some very story and spoiler heavy reasons why this mechanic exists, it definitely feels like the difficulty scaling wasn't tested too thoroughly to begin with. Though upon release, developers Koei Tecmo and Intelligent Systems have confirmed that there will be extra difficulties patched in, so if you need to wait a little bit longer for a more hardcore Fire Emblem fix, stay tuned. Fire Emblem Three Houses is quite the experiment, and it is one that pays off well for the most part. Distancing itself from games like Fates and Awakening, Three Houses manages to shake up core gameplay elements that have stuck with the series for over a quarter of a century, and still manages to contain what makes a Fire Emblem game a Fire Emblem game. Stuff like tight, intimate maps with intricate unit management that can sustain even the pickiest of strategy enthusiasts. And yes, while it might not stick to landing in every spot, Fire Emblem Three Houses genuinely feels like a game Intelligent Systems and Koei Tecmo wanted to make, rather than what they felt obligated to make.
There's nothing more soothing and relaxing than just being in my car and driving. American Truck Simulator is the closest the game has made me genuinely relax for the longest time. It's not a game about drifting corners, going stupidly fast, or taking part in some ridiculous storyline. In American Truck Simulator, you just drive. You drive because you need money. You drive because you need to upgrade your truck. You drive other people's trucks because you want to buy a new truck of your own or upgrade an existing truck. It's a game that's all about driving and driving realistically. This is a simulator, after all, the name isn't there ironically. There's a real weight and heft to each truck, and you'll need to take your trailer into effect when reversing or trying to make a turn. Speed limits and US road rules are enforced, meaning you'll need to keep to them unless you want to risk a fine. If you're driving along the interstate, you'll need to check into a weight station to see if you're carrying a dangerous amount of weight or not. And if you're running low on fuel or high in fatigue, you'll need to top that off or just rest up. It all sounds incredibly mundane, the last thing you want to do in a game ostensibly about driving, and yet, there's a weird satisfaction to everything you do. There's no pressure to beat the competition, there aren't any times to beat. There's just you, your music, and the road. The game's handling is generous enough to be pretty forgiving if you want it to be, and you can even turn off some of the more frustrating features just to focus on driving. It's a wonderfully lonely and meditative experience, something that no game about driving really does. In a world where gaming is always online and experiences are intended to be shared, having something that's so deeply personal that only you can experience is exceedingly becoming rarer. And it's arguably what makes American Truck Simulator, and even its predecessor, Euro Truck Simulator 2, stand out from being some irony-tinged joke game on Steam and into something legitimate. Coupled with this is the inspired decision regarding music. American Truck Simulator doesn't have any music playing while you're driving, it's up to you to provide it. While the game does have built-in support for playing your own MP3s, and it's easy enough to have something like Spotify or a podcast going in the background, the real MVP here is the game's online radio system. Effectively, the game has the built-in means for you to stream from a variety of online radio stations in-game. Provided you can get a streaming radio address, you can listen to just about anything. So if you ever wanted to drive down California's I-5 listening to some hardstyle, or hell, even some Australian radio, sure, go ahead. There's nothing stopping you. With some modding, you could even set it up so the game will only play local stations depending on your location in the game world, fading in and out to noise because you're out of the signal. Completing the experience is the community built around the concept of truck sim. While this extends to the generous helping of mods around Steam Workshop and the internet, the biggest thing coming out of it is Truckers FM, an online radio station started up by two brothers who are fans of the series. It's grown from being a fun hobby for those playing the game to becoming a semi-professional radio station, with dedicated shows and presenters all broadcasting people playing the game and even outside of it. It's become so prevalent that not only is it a default in every truck sim game, that actual truckers have been photographed listening to it. By far the biggest question and most exciting thing about American Truck Simulator is that it's a game still in progress. While it's not a live game in the sense of something like Destiny, it's a game that's periodically receiving updates and additions to make the game a bigger and better experience. Hell, it's even sharing updates with Euro Truck Simulator 2 in some cases. Both games recently just got an update to have voiced GPS lines as an example. The only real issue, and it's a minor one at most, is that those wanting to drive coast to coast or live out their dreams of driving Route 66 are going to be kind of disappointed. The game to date only features states on the west coast of America and only just out of the state of Washington, meaning that you could at least do routes from the top to the bottom of the country now. It's something that's going to be improved over time, no doubt, but it can be a bit of a bummer at times. Yet despite all this, there's still nothing quite like American Truck Simulator. Nothing else comes as close to replicating the simple pleasures of driving, and I think that's all the better for it. Anything more would have diluted what's such a unique experience, and it's going to be fascinating to see what comes out of it in the years to come. All that being said, American Truck Simulator comes highly recommended.
There aren't very many third-party developers that could be intrinsically tied to the success of the original PlayStation, quite like Namco. The PlayStation was home to some of Namco's legendary 90s arcade work, like Tekken or Point Blank, and even the home to some great original games, like Ace Combat or the Tails series. But kicking this off was a little game by the name of...
It's Ridge Racer! Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
Ridge Racer became notable as one of the PlayStation's launch titles, but quickly became a beloved franchise as the years went on. Yet it wasn't until 1998 where the series truly cemented itself as one of the greats with the release of Ridge Racer Type 4. The best way to describe Ridge Racer Type 4 would, weirdly enough, have to be the game itself. The Japanese version of the game presents this paragraph on not only its main menu, but front cover and disc art. Ridge Racer Type 4, creating a new wave in the racing scene. Powering beyond Ridge and Rage Racer, high-speed control and advanced dynamics accelerate the rush of a first-class victory. The culmination of performance and style provide the ultimate advantage in the race for entertainment. It's a ludicrous paragraph, but it's genuinely the best way to describe R4. It's the most complete Ridge Racer experience to date, surpassing the original Ridge Racer and improving on the ideas and mechanics implemented in Rage Racer. Mechanically, it's tighter than ever, with the game controlling and feeling fantastically. It'd have to be because it makes driving the game's 300 plus vehicles a joy. One area where the game definitely improves over Rage Racer is its Grand Prix mode. Instead of being a loose collection of races tied together with a looser sense of progression, the game ties together its races with a narrative. You're a participant in the Real Racing Roots 99 tournament, picking one of 4 teams, where you'll banter with a team leader between races as you progress through the tournament. It's a much fancier way of choosing your difficulty since each team has their own specific tuning quirks, but it's decent fluff that no other racing game was doing at the time. Where R4 really shines though is an area that not many racing games really even attempt, and that's providing a real sense of fun and optimism. While its arcade roots shine through leaving a smile on your face, there's a general vibe of positivity throughout, perhaps due to it being a game that, weirdly enough, looks forward to the new millennium and the possibilities it could bring. After all, this is a game where its final race is stated specifically to happen on December 31st, 1999. As you cross the finish line in first place on that track, fireworks go off and everybody is celebrating. Not just because you won as the conclusion of an exciting tournament, but because it's now January 1st, 2000, the dawn of a new millennium. Perhaps it's exceptionally corny looking back on it now, and maybe I'm reading into it a little bit too much, but given the world nowadays is not exactly the brightest or most optimistic place, it's kind of refreshing to see something so earnestly positive. Positivity is something that's a major component of the entire game. The menus drip with style, making great use of yellow as a dominant thematic color, literally called positive yellow. The soundtrack in particular is a banger in an era when Namco soundtracks across the board were just killing it. It's super upbeat and funky as all hell, complementing the action perfectly. Completing the experience is, of all things, a demo. Most copies of Ridge Racer Type 4 come with the Ridge Racer High-Spec demo, a version of the original Ridge Racer running at a smooth 60 FPS with some of the visual enhancements of R4. It's a cool throwback to see how far Ridge Racer has come in the space of a few years, and yet it can also be seen as emblematic of the future of Ridge Racer. After Type 4, Ridge Racer sadly fell into a rut. It became the series Namco put out at the launch of a new console, trading more on nostalgia, tech, and gimmick, and trying to put together a compelling racing experience. It joins a distressingly long list of arcade racing games that don't exist anymore, and it's a shame because we need more of them in this world. The tragedy with this is that Ridge Racer is the one Namco series that's kind of been left behind after all these years. Tails still gets regular sequels and it's still amazingly popular. Tekken is on its 7th iteration and currently regarded as one of the best, if not the best, competitive fighting games going around. Ace Combat got a new game for the first time in 6 years following a reboot and a weird free-to-play experiment, and hell, even Point Blank managed to get a new arcade game after 16 years and 2 entire console generations. Yet despite this, Namco haven't quite forgotten about Ridge Racer Type 4. It's one of the few Ridge Racer games available digitally, and was even one of the built-in games on Sony's PlayStation Classic microconsole. The soundtrack recently received a re-release in Japan to celebrate the game's 20th anniversary, with remastered tracks and some killer remixes. It lives on as a classic racing game, one of the PlayStation's defining titles, and a high mark for a publisher that was already doing a fantastic job on the system. I don't know if we'll ever get a new Ridge Racer game anytime soon, but knowing that R4 is still available and playable in 2019, and that it's still possible for people to experience such a bright and positive racing game, honestly, it's kind of fitting to what the game was all about. After all, if Point Blank and Ace Combat can return from obscurity, I don't think it's impossible to see Ridge Racer return to the world of gaming. And that is why Ridge Racer Type 4 is one of the recommended. The original Super Mario Maker was one of those games that worked better than anyone had anticipated. It was a concept that could have been nothing more than a complete gimmick, but led to some genuine surprises and some diabolical designs. Super Mario Maker 2 builds on this, and in doing so, becomes the most complete and best version of the game to date. At its core,
Level creation is still the focus of the game, and it's a big step up from the original Mario Maker. The addition of slopes is certainly welcome, but it pales in comparison to some of the other things Nintendo have added. For example, you can now set goal conditions for a course, which can be as simple as collecting a certain amount of coins, or a bit more complicated, like finishing a level having done handstands on a certain amount of trees. Super Mario Maker 2 adds in one new game style in the form of Super Mario 3D World, and the conversion to 2D doesn't remove what makes that game work. There's enough changes to the physics and controls that create their own set of unique elements, and Cat Mario is still as satisfying to control as it ever did. Plus, it brings in enough elements of its own game that it can make for some interesting level designs once creators have gotten their way with it. By far the most exciting thing about Super Mario Maker 2 is that the game has a much bigger emphasis on teaching and inspiring its players. The game now has a comprehensive tutorial system where it runs you through course design and all sorts of aspects to go along with it. To complement this, the game even has a proper move list for each game set, so you know exactly what Mario can do at any given time. There are even video tutorials on some of the more distinct elements of each game's moveset, such as Raccoon Mario, Cape Mario, and more, to give you an idea. This also extends into the new story mode, where you need to rebuild Princess Peach's castle by completing sets of levels designed by Nintendo using the Super Mario Maker 2 tools. They're not the best Mario levels you'll ever play, but they work well to provide inspiration as to what you can do in the toolset. But it's not a throwaway mode. It's treated with the same basic care as a standard Mario game, even extending assist features to help clear levels if you need them. Otherwise, there's plenty to do and gives players a sizable way to play if they don't feel like making levels or aren't able to connect to the internet. Speaking of, having internet access makes Super Mario Maker 2 a more complete experience, as you have access to Course World, the game's repository for its levels. It hasn't changed too much from the first game as far as searching and playing levels goes, but the biggest addition is that you can now play Super Mario Maker 2 levels online with other players. It's a cool idea, but you won't be able to play with your friends at launch. This is something Nintendo are aware of and have confirmed they'll be fixing it up in a post-launch update. While you can still search for levels a la carte, the best way to sample what users have created is through the Endless Challenge, Super Mario Maker 2's take on the original game's 100 Mario Challenge. Instead of taking on a limited amount of levels at a time, you take on as many levels as you can before you get a game over. It's not quite as compelling as I would have liked, but it's still a great way to sample levels if you don't feel like searching for something specific. Overall, Super Mario Maker 2 is a fantastic follow-up to one of the Wii U's more unique titles. It doesn't change too much, but adds a fantastic amount of new content and features that will keep people going and see some great levels get created. It's going to be really exciting to see what Nintendo have planned for the community and the game over the next few months, and what more they could possibly add. If you've never played the original game because of it being tied to the Wii U, you owe it to yourself to check out Super Mario Maker 2 because it might just be one of the best games of 2019.
Oh yeah, Mario time!
So that was our Mario Maker review, which is of course made while we were off television. We do actually have a YouTube channel. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. We have a YouTube channel and a Twitch channel and lots of other social media and things that you can check out as well. But I figured it was worth bringing in Jamie to discuss some of the other stuff that we've done on those channels while we've been away. And two of these videos that we've shown, three of these videos actually, were made by you.
Yeah, it helps when you're unemployed and you need stuff to do. Hey, all the time in the world,
Hey
I'm
man,
productive, right?
might as well do something with it. Hey, no, and I think again, I've spoken about it before, but I really like your series of recommended. I think it's a good way to do the video essay thing without, especially doing stuff that people may not have heard of, which was like what I liked about it. So it's
Yeah.
quite a unique twist on it. If
Like,
you will.
I wanted to do something where I wanted to teach myself how to do video editing.
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of the first thing, and I bought myself, when I resigned from my job, I bought myself an Elgato, I bought myself a Blue Yeti mic. I'm like, you know what, maybe I'll do some Twitch streaming. And I'm like, you know what? I want to give this a shot with something a little bit more serious. I'm like, I like writing, I kind of can talk a little bit.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do some stuff where I kind of experiment and be like, I basically wanted to make something like, hey, you should play this, but like, how do you do this in a way that's actually a little bit more visually interesting?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess one of those things is you've always been reasonably good at reading a script. It's my one flaw. I can't read a script. Nothing you ever see here is scripted. Because
Well, I don't know,
don't
man.
have it in me. I don't have it in me. It's
When
fine.
you hear back my audio, it's like, I don't want
Ah, you see that, but everyone does that. Everyone has that mindset of like, oh, I hate the sound of my own voice. But I guess that is the thing that I'd really encourage people to do. Is there are a lot of videos on our YouTube and obviously our website, newgameplus.tv, that don't make it onto television, whether that's interviews that we have with special people, whether it's things like the recommended, whether it's Cart getting something early and doing a bunch of great videos on it, stuff like Yakuza Judgment, all that kind
Love
of
you,
stuff.
Cart.
Yeah, and he does a lot of great videos for that kind of stuff as well. And so I would really encourage people to check that out because we do have a lot of stuff there will be a lot of videos up there at the moment because we have hit that period again where games have started coming out again and we're starting to get them early. Catherine, a bunch of other stuff. Other ones we can't name. This one we name this. I think we've named Catherine now because it's outside the embargo. Should be when this airs. If it doesn't, bleep it. That's all right. Doesn't matter. I should have
Note
asked
to the editors.
Yes, note to the editors. Bleep that. But so it is that period where we are going to start to do a lot more of these videos where it is stuff outside of that. But it's also, I guess, a question of what do people want to see? Keep in mind, we do get access to these games early. I mean, we got access to the Xbox 3 weeks earlier. Remember, that was what started our road down the big path to all the Twitch follows and stuff that we have.
There's a joke in there somewhere, but I'm not going to say
It was very funny. It was fine. But yeah, so it is always that thing of we obviously, as much as we enjoy making content, we do and we make the content that we want to make. What do you guys want to see? You know that we're weebs. You know that we do all that kind of stuff. And I guess obviously TGS will be wrapping up as this is the thing. So,
I will probably be drunk, eating too much chicken and playing too much Tekken.
That sounds good. But like I said just before, don't forget to check out newgameplus.tv, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, everything, newgameplus.tv. And we will hopefully see you guys next time.